I want to do a little head count in the morning because we're all tired. Who went to the party last night? And you're here so early. It's brave, very brave. I appreciate that. So how many are you designers? Awesome. Developers? Oh, wow. And is UX in the house? Combination thereof. Okay, okay. And marketing. Did marketing come? Of course not. So all of us, I want us to play a game. It's my new favorite game. I like to call it app versus site. Let's start with Airbnb. So this is the Airbnb app. And we're putting in Warsaw, because I'm coming to Warsaw. Beautiful city, by the way. So eclectic. And we've got that loader, and now we've got, we can open up these filters and choose dates. I'm gonna go save a filter. So far, just some scrolls. All right, well, that's a pretty one. Let's check it out. Ooh, it slides in from the side. There's some pictures. We swipe through them. All right. So that's the app. Let's check out the site. Now, Airbnb is really interesting because it's exactly the exact same content, but it's on a website. We've got even the same looking calendar going on there. Oh, there it is again. I want that. No. The teacups are pretty, but all right. So this is us scrolling around through the different images, and we're going to go check out the pretty one. And it's got that beautiful hero image. It's the same information, though, the same amenities, same listing of things. We want to see more. It just kind of pops some new information in there. I'm wondering if you've noticed that there's a difference here. There's exactly the same content, but there's a difference in how it's presented. What is that difference? Oh, wow, somebody got it. Okay, I won't have to lead with that question anymore. Let's check out Amazon's. This is their shopping cart app. It's not as nice as the Airbnb app, but you notice you can scroll through the different things, you can look at the different products, and everything is moving, everything is animated in this. Now let's check out, I mean, even this. I would say that their animations aren't that sophisticated compared to Airbnb's, but let's compare it to their website. All right, so when we go to different pages, it's like everything jumps in and out. Everything is painted immediately. It feels very different from the app. And that difference, again, comes down to animation. The difference isn't just the screen size or tapping versus clicking. One of these is a very static experience, and the other responds in every way. But does it have to be this way? Let's try this again. This is a Duolingo. I use this to learn different languages. I thought I would give Polish a try. Very tricky. This was only my second time trying to learn it. I'm doing all right. Doing all right. Notice we've got a little secondary animation telling me you got it right. And we slide forward as we go forward through the different questions. It's looking great. Nice. I didn't cheat. Unfortunately, I couldn't hear the words when I was doing this, so. Now let's compare that to the website. Well, we had that lovely little loader. We go to the basics. Notice it's still, we're jumping from screen to screen. But then when we start, we get this lovely little intro text. They updated this the moment I started recording this. It wasn't always animated. So now, when we select the correct one, all right, we're going to go down, we're going to click check, and we get this, you are correct, and we slide forward. So now we're sliding forward to the next ones, and we get an indication when we've gotten the correct one. Those two things are animated. So it feels completely different. You can't unsee the fact that some of these sites have animations that match their apps and others don't. Now, animation has existed in operating systems from iOS to Windows. And it's available in your phone, it's available in your apps. So why are they all using it and we aren't? And how can we set the web in motion? I think this might be it. Don't let me forget it. So before we get started, I want to let you know we're going to go on this journey. We're going to start with animation's past, how animation can look at how animation can help our users, the science of where animation works inside the human brain to make these things possible, where the animation has been on the web for all this time, and how animation is going to impact us in the future. All right, let's begin this journey with a trip through the human brain. Why do some designs, mainly apps, use animation while others, mainly web, don't? Scientific reasons. So at its core, I want you to remember this, because you will hear a lot of different words bandied about animation is this, animation adds delight, animation does blah, blah, blah. But at its core, animation is merely a visual representation of a rate of change over time. There are many different ways you can represent change. There's even ways you can do this with audio. The Doppler effect is one of them. You'll notice a train coming towards you sounds higher than when it passes you. It pitches lower. And that's just the train's noise indicating to you a change in the position of the train over time. You can also, because your brain is so smart, figure out how fast the train is going and whether or not it's going to hit you by listening to this. This has been used in all kinds of user interfaces, including this one. I went to visit a park yesterday. Oh my goodness. I'll do the noise. It goes boop, 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 and then it goes boop, 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 when it's about to say, don't cross anymore, hurry up, run as fast as you can hear this booping. So anyway, that's a good example of sound being used in an interface and changing to let you know how quickly you should be moving and what the hassles are. And this is good for people who can't recognize a visual rate of change, like the color of the sign. So with animation, we can change visual properties, not sound. We can animate position, we can animate size and opacity, shape, just about any visual property, we can animate it and change it, except for fonts. Seriously, what does a font look like in transition to a different font? What does a tree sound like falling in the forest? So we can use animation to indicate a change in direction, solidity, momentum, among other things. And any of these things can be applied alone or in combination to plus the user experience by reinforcing relationships, structures, and cause and effect. Now, operating systems and applications have access to animations for your. This is my little iPad, and you can see that here we're zooming in, and I love that effect because it shows me exactly which app I'm using at any given time. And then we'll zoom back out, and we can slide to the right to move forward through an information space. This slides up from the bottom. You get all these wonderful animations at your hand. But the web has been implementing just jump cuts, been limping along on jump cuts. Notice sidebar open, sidebar closed, sidebar open, closed. And this is because the web has its users trained, or rather, they were already trained. Now, a jump cut is a term from film, and it describes when the camera cuts directly to a different angle or a different screen. No fading, that would be called a fade out, no panning or moving the camera from side to side. It's common in dramas, soap operas, television. Here's an example from Inner Sanctum in 1948. Now the audiences have been trained when they see two people talking and there's a jump cut to this guy's face. Notice how he's looking off to the side. Now the camera jumps to her face. We've been trained to realize that wherever the actor is looking, that's where the camera is going to point next. So we can still imagine these two people talking in that visual space. Pretty neat, huh? However, a user interface doesn't have eyes. It's very hard for us to know where the camera is, quote unquote, pointing with this. This is a drop down. It opens, it closes. I borrowed it from CodePen. Code Drops. Thank you very much, Code Drops. So when a user sees this happen, some very interesting things happen in their brain. The human mind is clever enough then it can take this before image and this after image, and it can extrapolate between them what must have happened. This is a pretty complicated maneuver. In animation, studio animation, we call this in-betweening, and it is a dead-end job. You see all these little gray cats between the purple and the blue cat? Those are in-betweens. And most animators want to draw the purple cat and the blue cat, but all these gray cats, they send those to much cheaper animators in other countries, or they get an intern to do it. Nobody wants to die doing this job because it is busy work, it is grunt work, it is boring, it's a dead-end job, and it doesn't go anywhere. So when our minds are doing this, our minds are doing busy work. It's a lot of extra effort. It increases our cognitive load. And this is disruptive to our users' mental models as well. Especially with older users, you might hear things like, I don't understand what just happened. Does anybody have a parent? And you've been trying to walk them through something on the internet, and you hear, what just happened? Where did that go? I'm so confused. I hear this all the time. Well, see, we're in our mental prime. Our brains can do this sort of thing easy. I mean, most of us use a console log from day to day, and a console log is about as abstracted as you can get from an information space as you can get. But young and old users, this is a lot of work for their brains. We're in our mental prime. We look at screens every day. We anticipate a lot of stuff. Our brains are hardwired to do this work for us. Now, if there's no lag between these jump cuts, you and I, we don't notice anything's amiss. So back in the early 90s, operating systems developers, they realized that we can speed up mental processing by offloading interpretation from the brain, from the main part of the brain to its visual cortex. There were a lot of papers that were written in the 1990s. And many of them came out about animation being used in interfaces. They said things that sound very official, like by offloading the interpretation of changes to the perceptual system, animation allows the user to continue thinking about the task domain with no need to shift context to the interface domain. That's a lot of words. I like to use a visual shortcut for this. Here's a way of thinking about it. When your users are using your website, everything they're doing is taking place on their main thread. Now, if something disrupts that flow or jumps them out of it, it takes longer. It increases their cognitive load. But if you can get them to worry less about where all the bits and pieces are coming from and going to by using animation, you can offload that to their visual cortex or their GPU. Thus, you have more computing power. You keep them on main thread. This, in and of itself, is using the visual cortex instead of making you read text. So basically, researchers learned that by animating the transition between states, the viewer's visual cortex handled the change without interrupting their thought processes. This made everybody happy. You'll also notice that at the end of the 90s, none of these papers were coming out anymore. But operating systems like Windows and the ones on Macintosh computers started incorporating animation. You can infer that the people who were writing these papers probably were hired and all their work became classified. So now we get to relearn it all from scratch here in the web. Thanks. Old and young folks, we know they love Apple Touch devices. Who has not seen an annoying YouTube video of a baby slapping its hands against a touch screen? And it's like, oh, the baby is so smart, or the device is so well designed. It's not that complicated. The truth is that gestures aren't possible without animation. Now, tight coupling between human input and reaction from the design is what makes this possible. And now everyone is doing it. This is from a plane. I took a video of this on a flight, and you'll notice when you spin it, it snaps back into position to make sure that none are ever slightly off. I thought that was weird, so I took this video. None of the DVD covers are ever partly off the screen. So the feedback is immediate with this, and it's minimal, and it impacts more than just a spot under my fat finger. Now, not all touch interfaces are small. While movement makes a lot of sense on a small one, it also makes a lot of sense in big ones like this. This is my friend in Barcelona, Jonathan. Can you imagine him manipulating these things using an interface that didn't have animation? he would probably have to like tap this magnification button, input a number, tap this button to scale it super big, tap that button, point, input, run, point, input, run. There's no live feedback in that. To get this kind of live feedback, it has to move, it has to animate. But why am I helping you imagine what this interface would be like without animation when I can show you? Here's a touchscreen device that has very little animation. Yes, there were touchscreen phones before there were iPhones, and all of them came with styluses. Notice that this stylus is a replacement for the mouse. This person is taking the stylus out and tap, look at this, tap, page rewipes, and then tap, and then something else will be painted in. Nothing's animating here. The screen is changing. Tap, new thing, tap, new thing. Notice how this is just pecking away. Tap, change, jump, cut, jump, cut. And it was pretty miserable. I think there are even scroll bars on that one, but there are scroll bars on this one. We even had touch phones way back then, too. And this one even comes with, get this, a tiny stylus. Because what do you want when you're using your touch phone? You want a tiny stylus to use with it. Oh, wow. It was the precursor to the iWatch. Everybody was like, oh, yeah, we did that first. So watch what happens here. There's a tiny animation to indicate that you've pecked it. Oh, my God, it has hover effects. But aside from that, there's not a whole lot of animation happening up here. It's pretty sad. So watching this, oh, look, it even has a scroll bar. I bet you can tap at the arrows to make it go up or down the page. Oh, wow. So how could we have lived without animation on touch devices? Even when we reduce motion on iOS using the reduce motion settings here, we still end up falling back to using fades. And those are still animations. All it's doing is reducing animation, not eliminating it. Which brings us to another new term, animacy, or how alive and thus attention-grabbing something appears to be. Some people find increased animacy really, really disturbing and annoying, and it makes them sick. And that's why we give them fades. There's some more research on this, because I love research. Research has shown that humans are suckers for visual change. I mean, this makes sense. We all evolved out in the great savannas of Africa, and what was that rustling of the grass out of the corner of our eye? Was it a lion, or was it something tasty to eat? So it makes sense that it meant life or death for our ancestors. And human attention can be grabbed by two things, color and motion. Which goes, the old adage, if you want someone to notice something, you want to make it bright and jiggly. Of course, this could be abused. And slowly, people became desensitized to this sort of thing. We all have a cone of vision around wherever our eyes are focusing. In the center of this cone of vision, colors are very visible, and contrast is, how do I put this? Lines are very delineatable. Now, in the peripheral, contrast and luminosity changes and movement are more detectable around the edges. So this goes to imagine that what we want to do is we want to keep, if we're going to be showing people things in the center of their vision, we want to use low animacy kinds of animation like fades and color. And in the peripheral, we may need to increase animacy, or how alive the interface appears to be, by giving it a little motion or increasing its contrast. But we don't want to overdo it, or else we'll end up having a Times Square issue on our hand. This is from a walk down Broadway. I was recently in New York, and I was walking with my friend, and I was like, wow, you have so much motion design. I can't stop looking at all of this. Look at all these bright flashing things, and I wonder if they used After Effects to make that one, and who did this? And she was like, I don't even see this anymore. I'm a New Yorker. We see this every day, and we don't even notice it. And that's because the ads aren't there for New Yorkers. They're there for the tourists. When everything vies for our attention, nothing commands our attention. Motion and opacity are to animation what font sizes and weight are to typography. That is to say, you do not want to make everything 48 pixels big and bold and italic with underlines. You want to be judicious in your use of animation and cautious. Now, you might be wondering, if animation is so great, Rachel, why don't we have animation already on the web? Maybe we don't need it. Well, actually, the truth is we have been trying to make animation a part of the web for some time. Long, long ago, in the far, far, far away time of 1996, oh my God, that was 20 years ago. Whoa. Flash ruled over the people of interaction development. A benevolent dictator provided tools and a user interface and a timeline, oh my God. And everything was good. Also, in 1999, about 3 years later, this little thing was created. This is Smile. You can remember it as Smile, pronounced like that, like the facial expression. Another animation format from the open source collaborations of the W3C. We know it as Smile, the SVG animation language. And it hung around, and not much happened with it. So a decade passes, and there's been no movement in web animation. We have Smile, nobody really supports Smile, and we have Flash. Flash runs on everything, so we're good, right? But this little thing comes along, this iPhone, and the people over at iOS Safari are like, man, we're not gonna support Flash, but how do we get websites on our phone to look as awesome as the apps? They're animated. They have to be animated because of gestures. We gotta have the Apple website look that good too. We better get some kind of an animation language out there in the open web. In the meantime, over in W3C land, everyone was constantly arguing about what a CSS animation or transition spec should look like, and they could not come to a consensus. It's been like 10 years since Smile, and nobody has figured this out. So the people at iOS Safari were like, let's just not bother with the committees or the standards. Let's just do it our way. And so they did. They brought us CSS transitions and CSS animation specs. These specs are not perfect. They have problems, but they're what we have, and we do have animation on the web now, so mixed blessing. This made Steve Jobs' infamous thoughts on Flash letter possible. Basically, in this letter, he says, Flash is never going to run right on an iPhone, so it can go away. Flash developers retreated from the web development community, and we moved to a more typographic place. This was a very good respite for us. We moved away from creating flashy, jiggly, bouncy sites, and more toward, well, how can we make this legible and accessible? We needed that. In the meantime, over in Internet Explorer land, things were getting hairy. 3 animation engines. Oh my God, there's way too many. Internet Explorer said, look, we can't implement 3 different animation engines in our browser. You need to provide us with some kind of a spec, some kind of an outline of how each of these should work so that we can build one engine and then build these on top of it with an API or something. You know, come on, standards, get with this. We'll implement the transitions and the animations because everybody likes them, but you're not getting Smile until you can give us an API to rule them all. An API that could entirely underlie all browsers' animations while letting JavaScript developers access that animation engine. What would it be? When would it come? It was a really, really big API, and it took a long time to write because everything was done by committee. So after several years of drafting, spec authors are finally nailing down the edge cases, and even Edge has moved to adopt it. Now, after several years of drafting, we now call it the Web Animations API. It is the one to rule them all. The downside of all this is we waited so long that, unfortunately, Chrome opted to deprecate Smile. So that's dead. But we still have an API, and it does normalize so much behavior between CSS animations and transitions that it makes callbacks and event listeners across browsers much more reliable to work with. And it's still a really big deal for browsers and developers and animators. This API gives us control over syncing, for instance. Now, this cat over here is running with CSS. Notice how they're all running out of sync. But over here, these cats are all running in line. This is using the Web Animations API. Essentially, what's happening is I'm taking the time object. Do that again. What's happening over here is I'm taking while these all just start at any given point on the document's timeline, this cat will inherit where his forefather's timeline is. So they all start at the same point and they stay in sync. Without the API, you're pretty much at the mercy of the clock of the computer. We also get to use the API to change playback rates. You'll notice that I'm using a decay on the playback to make Alice run a little bit slower behind the Red Queen here. If you want to speed her up, you keep clicking on them, and it increases their playback rate to make them go faster and faster. Now, you could imagine using something like this to create an accessibility setting for older users who might be confused by quickly moving interfaces, so that they could slow down how fast animations run across the board for their web in the browser. It's pretty cool. It also lets us seek. That is to say, it lets us run forward or backward or jump anywhere in between an animation. This is a single animation on Alice to make her run from big to small. And depending on whether you click the cupcake or the bottle, you'll run forward through that animation or backwards. You could also give it a specific time and jump to any place on that scale. If you're interested in learning more about the Web Animations API, I've been writing the docs over at MDN. And there's a handy resource URL at my site. Now, immediately what you're going to be asking as developers is, what's support like for this? Well, Edge has moved the API into the hopper, partially thanks to community votes on their user voice account. Nice. Thank you, everyone who votes on those. They do pay attention. And WebKit has decided to climb on board, which is wonderful, because they stayed ambivalent about it for a long time. Until then, we are fortunate enough to have a Google-maintained polyfill, so you can get your feet wet if you like. So animation is now officially a part of the front-end development toolkit. Hurrah! The war is over, right? Well, it actually has a really big impact on how we design the web, our processes, everything. From how you develop a design, if you're a designer, all the way down to how you test it, if you're in UX. Animation has repercussions, because we're not working with just 2 dimensions anymore. We're working with space and time. So the Web Animation API makes in-browser tools, animation tools like these from Firefox is possible. This is look, it's a timeline UI, and it's not Flash. And so here we can use we can use this lovely timeline to scrub forwards and backwards through different animals and their different animations. And Chrome, of course, has come out with their own tools. They take a slightly different spin on it. It's wonderful to see they've got these little snapshots and another timeline. It's wonderful to see these 2 browsers trying to come up with their own spins on timelines. And I'm really hoping that Edge and Safari will join in and try to come up with their own takes on it, because how we design things for the living web will, of course, be very different from how we've designed things in the past with Flash or even in browsers today. Competition. So, how many sites are using CSS animations today? Well, according to Chrome's anonymous opt-in usage stats, animation is being used at 37% right now. That property is featured on 37% of the sites that people visit in Chrome. And the prefixed version, WebKit-animation, is a little bit higher. So those 2 numbers probably overlap in some places. Transition is used even more. Close to 51% of sites that people use on Chrome are loading transition in their CSS, and slightly less WebKit transition. Now, let me give you a little bit of context for that. Justify content is at 40% right now. That's whether things are aligned left or aligned right. Oh, wait. Justify. Oh, man. So, anyway. Text transform, also 51%. So that gives you an idea that animation is being used a lot in a lot of places compared to other CSS properties. But not all animation on the browser is contingent upon the Web Animations API or style sheets. Of course, if animation is so popular, people are going to find a way. And what do people do when they don't have good enough tools at their hands? They make their own. Interaction developers who seem to have left the industry when Flash went away, they have not been idle. And we have so many wonderful libraries because of their hard efforts. And it's not just DOM elements that we're animating here. This is Mo.js, which is for DOM element animation. And look at this. This is written in JavaScript. Beautiful, right? Something you would have thought you needed to do with Flash back in the day. And this is Snap SVG, which is perfect for animating just SVGs. I like that. It snaps. Does this one do something? Yes, he does. I bet he does. Oh, yeah. And then we have D3.js, which does visualizations with Canvas that might be impossible to do with the document object model alone. This would be very hard to do with the DOM, but here we're doing it with Canvas, and we're being able to create these zoomable graphs. These were things that people used to only do with Flash and its ilk, and now we're able to do all of these things using open web standards. It really has taken the power of interactivity and given it back to the people who build the web. I could do this all day. And then there's WebGL, which lets us do things with 3D that we had never believed possible in the past. And we got a little web audio API going on in here too. But look at this. This is WebGL. This is happening in the browser. This is not a video, although it could be. But if you want to interact with it, it's possible because it lives there in the document. And saving the best for last, this is the industry darling. This is the industry darling GreenSock or GSAP. It does DOM and SVG animation. It normalizes a lot of behavior, especially with SVG, because different browsers have very different opinions on how SVG should be implemented, and they're trying to normalize, but it's tough. It's been around so long. It's kind of just a little bit of a letdown. But this is all done using GreenSock. Once again, can't believe it's not Flash. There should be a site, I can't believe it's not Flash. So it used to be that the only animation in your browser came from a third-party plugin, or it was the natural scrolling behavior of the user. It is the animation that your browser is most optimized to perform, by the way. Now, animation helps us bring affordances from reality into our work. This is from IBM's motion design research, where they sent a group of their designers in-house to their machine archive. I think it's this building where they keep every machine that they have ever built. And so they went to this archive, and they got to experiment with typewriters, with tape readers, all these things, and come up with a huge set of motion design principles, of loaders, of timing and events that conformed to these physical objects that were a core part of IBM's brand and identity. And that's special. Brought real-life affordances to their online experience. You'll notice here that the way the menu slides out is very much in time with how the typewriter works. Anyway, the Watson team has done some of the finest work at integrating branded motion into a company's style guides rooted in a company's product. Now, motion and animation can even be packaged into modular, componentized micro-interactions in design systems. I may have had some helped a bit with this one. But it's a library that they provided where animation was a part. Salesforce's Lightning design system, animation is a part of the components that they give developers, third-party developers, to create fully branded Salesforce systems. Of course, all this animation means that our process has got to change. Static wireframes and PSDs, they're just not going to cut it. There's no way to express emotion with those sorts of things, no way to show that fourth element, that time. They just cannot convey a moving medium. But we have options, and oddly enough, these options come to us from the rich history of studio animation. Storyboards. They're one option we have. Storyboards are used in cinema, they're used in game design, interaction development, why not web development too? And they started, this is a picture I took when I was at the Disney Family History Museum in California. This is an original storyboard for Ferdinand the Bull. Disney Studios originally came up with storyboards when they were working on their first feature-length animated film, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Now, up until Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, when Disney would be making a cartoon, all the different animators would kind of go off into their own corners and they'd like draw something and they'd get it looking good, and then they'd give it to their guy, and all the guys would come together and they'd be like, well, I have about 5 minutes of Mickey doing this. Well, I have about 5 minutes of Donald Duck doing this. We'll draw like Mickey and Donald Duck meeting up together in the middle, and yeah, I will stitch them together. And that was how animations were done. But that would not work for a feature-length film. What happened if they removed a dance sequence and everybody was working on the dance sequence at the same time? That was wasted effort. So they came up with storyboards, which meant that every morning people would put down, they would put paper on a board like this, and they would agree that that's the direction that the story was going, and each one of the different studios would pick up their board and they'd take it to their animators to work on. That way, they were having a fully asynchronous workflow. It was beautiful. No one had ever done it before. Everything was very waterfall in the past. And now, it was funny because at the time, everyone in movies in Hollywood was like, a full-length animated feature film, they'll never make it happen. And then when they saw Disney making it happen, they were like, it will never catch on. And then when it caught on, they were like, oh my God, we need to be using storyboards too. So film adopted storyboards as well. There's not a film you've seen that wasn't storyboarded. And Hollywood blockbusters, they have masses of storyboards behind them. And most of the people who work on those storyboards used to be cartoonists who drew comic books. It's amazing. Anyway, storyboards let teams coordinate, reduce dead ends, and gave directors a huge overview of what was going on. Now, when you're using these in your own process, they can range from very informal, sloppy-looking things like this one, for sharing some ideas or guiding a small team. I drew this for a little project that you saw earlier, the little DevTools Challenger thing with the fish for Firefox's tools. It's just Post-its and a lot of scribblings. But you could always also kick this up a notch to a way more formalized, templatized example. I've even put my templates up here for you if you want to use them. This was a part of a motion design audit I did for a client, for instance. Video is really hard to pass out at a meeting or to send to someone's inbox. It's very large, it's very unwieldy, and also it doesn't work very well in PDFs. But this is like a nice thing that I can give to somebody and say, this is where the problem is, implement it like this. You'll notice it's even color-coded. I've got blue happening with actions, and orange indicates when something is animating. But storyboards can't show how an interaction will feel. And one of the first things I hear when I deliver one of these is, well, this is great, but can I see what that would look like? It makes complete sense. If a picture is worth 1,000 words, then videos must be worth 1,000 meetings. And that is what animatics are good for. Here's an animatic from a friend of mine. This is from studio animation. You can see it's sort of a storyboard just set to music. This is Space Unicorn. So the nice thing about this is it can be screen tested to an audience. And if I'm not seeing smiles on your faces, I know we're not doing this animation right. We need to send it back to the house to get them to work on it. We can do the same thing by making small videos or GIFs of our wireframes. I made this using a stop-motion app on my phone on a lunch break to come up with an idea for how a loader might look with some Post-its in a back room somewhere. But keep in mind that animatics are not deliverables. You do not want to throw animatics over the fence to your developers and be like, just make it look like this. I've been there. I've been up till 1 a.m. and had a designer going, no, like this. And I'm like, is that 1 second long transition? You got any numbers for me? What did you export this out of? Where are your numbers? Yes, so anyway, caveat. While it's great to give people an animation of how it should look, like a video of how it should look, make sure you also are giving them numbers to reproduce that video with. But I'm preaching to the choir here. Lastly, we have prototypes. Prototypes are possibly the most powerful, but they also require the most investment. Studio animation animatics can be screen tested on an audience, but the web is not a one-way interaction. The web is interactive. The audience testing requires interaction. We have to have them do things to it. It's one thing to show your boss a video of a loader. It's another thing to say, here's a woman from accounting using this website. Let's see how she does with it. That requires a prototype. You can't test with storyboards or videos as well. You will need a prototype if you want to use real people. So we have a couple of options. We have a couple of products. One of them is Envision. Envision is one of the biggies in the industry right now. They've recently reinvested in their animation tooling. It's web first. This was originally designed for people who were building for the web, and thus you'll notice it has a more web-approached tooling instead of some of the more native-oriented things we'll be looking at in a moment. It's collaborative, it's interactive, it's web first, and it's so big it's unlikely to die or go anywhere anytime soon. If you have to invest in some sort of a prototyping framework or app in the future, Envision is not a bad place to look. Now, there are newer apps like Principle for Mac that are coming out, and they've been designed specifically for motion design. That Principle also, unfortunately, comes from a native-first space, but it's also motion-specific. It exports to video, so you can show something up on a screen in a meeting, and also interactive prototypes, so you can have people test it. And finally, there are massive prototyping frameworks like Framer.js. Now, the neat thing about Framer.js is that it mockups in code. Because it's using code, it does require an investment. People do have to learn code, or they have to use this special interface that they have. But the nice thing is that because it's using code, you can do A/B tests. So if you have a lot of people and you need to test things, you actually need to run code past them. Using a code-based prototyping framework might make a lot of sense. It's throwaway code. It requires a huge investment to learn, but for the right situation, it makes a lot of sense. Also, all of the demos and things you saw on this, those were all on the page. They did a very beautiful job, I think, of showing that. Just wanted to give them a shout out for that. So the web is moving. Animation isn't going to leave anytime soon, especially not with 50% of the sites visiting Chrome having transitions on them. It's changing. It's changing us. It's changing our designs. It's changing our processes. It's changing our documentation. The web is not print. This machine is not a piece of paper. It can create sounds. It can create noises. Some of them can create vibrations. It can do so much. It can move. We are not designing static 800 pixel wide photos of information anymore. Although, back when I first started making websites, I would have been very proud if I could have said that I made this one. We have a fully interactive, responsive, immersive, and accessible medium for the first time in human history. We have never had a canvas so infinite before. Also, this is a band. One of its members used to be a Flash developer. Now he's a front-end developer. He made this using SVG and hand-coded it. It's beautiful. Wish I could have just had that as a backdrop for the rest of this talk. It was so nice. Material design showed us that animation can be as much a part of web design as native design. This was the first major effort we saw from a brand trying to bring its online presence and its native presences into one house, make them equal partners. And that's important because with touch becoming more and more commonplace, the distinction between native and web, it starts to blur. We end up with terms like web app, and what does that even mean anymore? In the future, We may no longer draw such lines in the sand. We may create experiences that are wonderful for everyone on all devices with all their senses. Animation belongs to all of us now. We've a newsletter, we have a community that you can be a part of if you want to learn more. Let us set the web in motion together. Thank you very much.